This video is showing you how to tone your white drawing paper so that you're starting with a middle ground when you're doing a charcoal drawing. That will allow you to save a lot of time because instead of having to build up all of those middle values from zero, you can start with like a middle gray, and then you'll be erasing your lighter tones and you'll be adding more charcoal to get your darker values. So the easiest way to do this is if you have access to powdered charcoal. This is willow charcoal, which is a kind of, they'll take willow branches and carbonize them, so they essentially burn them until they're charcoal, and then they grind it up into a really fine powder. So I'll just show you how that works. You can buy this in large bottles, and then you just sprinkle it on, and then use a tissue or a paper towel, or if you have a chamois rag, which is a leather piece of leather that you can use to blend it around. So you would just be spreading it on your paper until you get to as close to a middle gray as you can. So the goal is to kind of buff it into the texture of the paper until you don't see the white of the paper showing. And it's up to you if you want to go all the way to the edges of your paper so that you don't have a distracting white border, or if you want to try to keep a little bit of white so that when you're handling your charcoal drawing, you don't get as much charcoal all over your hand. So it's kind of up to you if you want to go almost the edges but not actually spread charcoal off the edges. I've put 3 or 4 sheets of scrap newsprint drawing paper underneath my good piece of drawing paper that I'm toning to give it a little bit more cushion. You want to have a soft surface underneath there. You don't want to be picking up the texture of a wooden floor or bricks or anything that might be, grains of sand or anything that might be on the floor underneath your paper. So you do want a nice soft surface to start with. And the newspaper and newsprint also keeps your tabletop clean. The charcoal can get fairly messy. So let's say that you don't have the powdered charcoal. You can take some regular charcoal and grind it up, or you can just use the sticks to tone your paper. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of charcoal. All of these sticks at the top are vine charcoal, and it's hard to tell just by looking at them because the size might seem like they're real similar. But what is the giveaway is it feels almost weightless. It feels like it's made out of styrofoam. So typically the vine charcoal comes in fairly long sticks. I don't find it very practical to draw with a big long stick like this. I often will break it into a shorter piece so that I can just use the side of the charcoal when I'm drawing. But that's a personal preference. Even this great huge chunk is actually vine charcoal. You can still see the little stems and irregularities showing it really was just a stick of wood at one point. And that, again, you can draw with this as well. The nice thing about the vine charcoal is it can be blended back into the tone of your paper really easily, whereas the compressed charcoal is a much more permanent type of mark. So you need to be more careful when you're adding the compressed charcoal if you intend to erase it later. You want to apply it in a fairly light way. So all of these bottom sticks here are various brands of compressed charcoal. Some of them have a little bit of a varnish coating on them that makes them appear shiny. And you may find that when you try to draw with the compressed, some parts rub off easier than others. And sometimes you have to work through this thin layer of varnish that's on the compressed charcoal before it draws nice and smoothly. Charcoal also comes in the same kind of rating system as far as softness and hardness that you see when you're buying graphite pencils. So if you want a charcoal that blends really easily, I tend to prefer the 4B and the 6B. Those are the softer charcoals. You can buy compressed charcoal in 2H even, I believe, and HB, which are the much harder charcoals, and they don't seem to blend for me as well. So I tend to choose 4B or 6B when I'm buying compressed charcoal. Charcoal can also come in a round format, or it can come in a rectangular square. These are actually almost square when you're looking at it in cross-section, but I've seen ones that are flatter rectangular pieces as well. And I really do like the rectangular pieces if you're going to be using the side of the charcoal to lay down shapes, because it's less likely to roll under your fingers. So those are some considerations to think about when you're purchasing your charcoal. And we're going to be asking you to have both kinds for our drawing class. So the vine charcoal is really ideal for doing those initial measurements and lay in, because you can draw on it, and then if you don't like the line, you don't have to use your eraser. You can just buff it back in and the lines just sort of disappear so that you don't have to go back and retone your paper after each change that you make to your proportion. So use a real light touch until you're working out your size of things. If you don't like an angle, you can just keep changing it until you get things the way you like it, and you still have that beautiful basic tone on your paper. If you tried the same thing with compressed charcoal and then you don't like the line, it's really hard to get rid of it, and then you've got a lot of effort to try to get that back to a nice smooth gray. What you might have to do is even erase the line and then reapply the ground. So it's a lot more of a headache to try to make changes when you're using the compressed charcoal. Looks like there was sort of an oily residue under there too. So anyway, it's a little bit harder to get rid of those completely once you've drawn in the compressed charcoal. So let's say you don't have the powdered graphite and you're going to be just applying a ground with your charcoal. Go ahead and choose one of the compressed charcoals or the vine charcoal. You can see what you prefer. So let's try a comparison here. We'll do a little bit of the toning. This is the vine charcoal. It appears pretty dark, but really because it's so fragile, a lot of it ends up lifting off as you rub across it. You want to be careful as you're toning not to have any water on your hand or water near the paper, because if there are any spots of liquid on your hand or on the paper, it creates a really dark, almost permanent mark, and it's hard to erase that charcoal away in those areas again. The other thing that you might be cautious about is not having any sort of oil or lotion on your hand, because again, you'll create these oily marks on the paper that are really hard to blend in to an even tone. So try to have nice, dry, clean hands and no water near your works area. So I'm going to use this vine charcoal, and you can use willow charcoal as well. Willow and vine are both very forgiving, beautiful charcoals to work with. I'm just using the side of it, so I'm not laying down a whole bunch of lines like this. They're a lot harder to kind of get to blend in, but I'm just laying the side of the charcoal down and rubbing it back and forth. It looks like there's a little bit of a seam in my newspaper that's underneath here, and that's creating this mark here. So even with 3 or 4 layers of paper on top of that, I'm going to have to fight this a little bit. So another reason to have a nice smooth surface underneath there to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and buff this in a little bit. I want to try to suppress the white texture of the paper, and I'm just striving for a pretty even tone here. So I'm going to tone all the way to the edges of my paper there. You could also use the compressed. Just use a very, very light touch. So I'm barely making contact with the paper at all. Again, there's something underneath here that's picking up a little bit of texture. It could be eraser crumbs or other little things that I hadn't anticipated. But try to get those things out from under your paper once you notice them. There's some other little chunk of something. So it doesn't take much to mess up the evenness of your tone. So you can see the compressed charcoal still leaves some evidence of the stroke marks. It's a little bit harder to blend to a nice even tone. So if you have enough vine charcoal to spare, I would recommend using that to get your basic toning level. And then when you're ready to later do the drawing, we'll be blocking in, again, our basic shapes using the vine charcoal so that we can fix things and change it without messing up the tone, and then redraw again with whatever shapes you're trying to figure out. And again, super forgiving, super flexible. If your hands can't rub it off sufficiently, sometimes the paper towel does a better job of reblending that tone so you can work with it again. So we'll be using this method for most of our charcoal drawings this term. You can use it when you're doing your value scale drawings. You can do it when we do the sphere drawing or the multi-value still life. We're going to be doing some drapery perhaps, and some longer 2 or 3 day drawings. Even at the end when we do if we do a self-portrait, you could be doing this technique if you like it. It saves a lot of time getting those middle values in there for you.